Ooh, okay. Back online. Anyone just let me know what the sound is like. Maybe I'll risk unmuting.
Just let me know what the sound is like.
Okay. Cool.
Maybe I'll risk.
That sounds fine. Muted again. Or how about this? Yeah, fuck it. We'll mute it. Alright. Height. Let's get a little pencil sketch down. For these purposes, I do like to keep the pencil sketch pretty loose. Also, just I'm working on my sketchbook upside down, so that because I think for painting it's nice to be able to see the palette, and I didn't want the cover of the book to be over here and have to have the palette way off camera. So yeah. I am working from reference today. But it's from photos that I shot a while back that I totally forgot about. Until the other day. I was like, oh my god, I forgot about this photo shoot. It was a good shoot, so figure I should do some stuff from it, utilize it. What I'm focusing on here are mostly kind of the larger shapes, because for these purposes I'm not going to go super tight. I'm not going to render stuff. It's too small. But it's nice to if you want to just figure out some studies, to possibly do paintings from in the future. It's a nice kind of quick way to figure some of that stuff out. If I forget. Always good to have an eraser handy. But also depends on how accurate you're trying to be as far as the eraser goes. For something like this, I don't know. It's not completely necessary. It is a rainy Monday here in Los Angeles, so there is always the possibility that the power will go out. Much of Los Angeles' infrastructure does not deal well with storms. And my building in particular kind of sucks. The electrical sucks anyway. So, if the power goes out, I apologize. I hope it doesn't. Feel like maybe I should have set up my phone to record as well. Although if the power goes out, then my light source goes out, so I know this pencil sketch is very light. It's hard to see, so I'll keep it quick so we can get to the fun stuff. But I don't know. I'm not going to say this is necessary because you could probably just go straight in the watercolor. I just tend to think first in drawing, so it's just easier for me. And it's nice to just maybe get some of the basic shapes that you know you're going to want to get into the painting. So what I'll probably do is I'm gonna do 2 figures on this page, so I'm just gonna get both the sketches down. It kind of gives me a sense of how they might interact on the page. It's always a nice thing to consider when you're working in a sketchbook. Page composition. Even though it's just sketches, and but I don't know, there is something nice when you look at a composed sketchbook, no matter how loose some of the stuff might be. It's just a lot more impressive. I don't always adhere to that. Sometimes I just scribble on pages. And that's okay too. And as we go, if anyone has any questions, of course, just hit me up in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it, and I will answer to the best of my ability. So, again, just mostly paying attention to big shapes and interesting angles. Because I am going to be using some gouache as well. I'm not a purist. I will freely and happily mix watercolor and gouache. I know a lot of people, a lot of watercolor purists don't do that, and that's fine too. Whatever gets you to the end result that you want. I love the look of mixing watercolor and gouache, so I like to do that. And it works a little more like oil painting that way. And for me, what I like about that is then when I do pick up oils, they don't feel completely foreign. So I like to have that ability to do some transparent and opaque. You can go a little transparent with gouache, but it's never going to quite be as transparent as watercolor is. And when you start to water gouache down that much, it starts to really mess with the pigment to binder ratios. So it'll start to break apart and get a little granular. Which, if that's a look that you want, cool. It's just good to be aware of it. Alright. Almost through the drawing here. hang in for a couple more minutes and then we'll get into some fun color stuff. Unless people like seeing the doodly part, in which case, awesome. I always love seeing people do like rough sketches and things. I think it's a lot of fun, but I know not everyone does. And after all, I did advertise a watercolor demo. But most of the time, people don't really get to see the rough sketch. Usually because like when I'm working on the acetate, on Duraline, I do the rough in a 50% gray, and it does not show up that well on camera. So I don't usually shoot that part of it. Not that this is showing up fantastic either. Part of that is maybe the glare. I can try and... yeah, it shows up a tiny bit better. Okay. So then what I always do first, hang on. I like that necklace. It's cool. Alright, there's the little pencil side. Let's grab a brush here. This is just it's a travel brush from Escoda. It's the Escoda Reserva. These things are pretty rad, right? Just use it as a cap. Pull that off, flip it around, got your handles, so really handy to travel around with. I have done so with these brushes. This is a number 6, this one is a number 2. Escoda, all handmade, beautiful brushes, I love them. Highly recommend them if you like to travel with watercolors. These things are awesome. So, first things first, what I do after the drawing, it's just water, right? Because water will fix the graphite to the paper. So that's a nice, easy way. If one of the reasons to do that, not that I'm concerned with the drawing sticking around, but I don't want the graphite to mix in with the pigment, right? Especially if I want some cleaner, lighter pigments, I just don't want the graphite mixing in and muddying up the pigment. So a little bit of water on it will fix that. I'm just kind of keeping an even coat of water on the whole page. I do have it clipped down. This paper, I'm working in a Strathmore tan-toned multimedia sketchbook. It's got really heavy paper, which is nice. So it doesn't warp like crazy, but all paper will warp a bit when you get it wet. So there's no avoiding that. Now we'll just while that dries, I'm gonna lay out some gouache. I'm just putting out the primaries, really. So I'm going to put out a decent amount of white. That's probably way more than I will use. And I always, with gouache, I always end up putting out a lot more than is necessary. So I try to be really reserved. And I always end up using even less than I thought. This is permanent white. This is a permanent yellow. This is a pure red. Ooh, this stuff's thick. And then I will put out some cobalt blue. And then I think I will put out a high value aqua blue. I always like to have some kind of like higher value colors. That's way too much. But anyway, I am using Holbein gouache. Their pigments are cleaner. When you lighten them, they don't get as chalky as a lot of the others because they pick their pigments based on their natural opacity. So they tend to, I don't know, they just tend to stay a bit more pure. Now they'll still lighten and darken like gouache does, right? Lighter colors dry darker, darker colors dry lighter. It's really annoying. But that's the nature of gouache. Alright, so let's lay down some wash. I'm going to paint these one at a time, even though I drew them at the same time. So let's figure out our wash color here. I'll tend to start with the shadows, try and keep them a little more transparent. A bit of burnt umber. And ultramarine. This, to me, creates just kind of a nice sort of neutral. Although in this case, I might go a little more blue. Maybe we'll even grab a little bit of cobalt. I'm using mostly Daniel Smith watercolors. With the exception of the alizarin crimson, which I think is a Holbein, because I think they do a permanent alizarin in watercolor, which is this one here. I'm not going to remember all the colors. Maybe. Pretty sure that's Hansa Yellow Light, Hansa Yellow Medium, alizarin crimson. This is a Cad Red Light. This is a French ultramarine, so it's a warmer, more red ultramarine. This is, either manganese or cerulean. I think it's cerulean. Cobalt blue, Indian yellow, yellow ochre, burnt umber, burnt sienna, sap green, maybe, olive green. I believe this is, what's it called? Neutral tint. No, that's neutral tint. This is like, actually I think these are both neutral tint. I don't know why I separated them. And this is a, I keep wanting to say Aperol Red, but Aperol is a liquor, not the watercolor. I'll remember later. And then that's just a regular ultramarine. So a little cooler than this one. Sorry, that's my super like in-depth rundown of my colors. Alright. Let's do this. Just laying a little more water down, knowing that I kind of want to get a little bit of a wash effect going. So a little bit, and we'll see. I feel like this can use a little more color. It was starting to get a little too just blah. A bit more blue, and let's do a tiny bit of alizarin. It might feel a little better. Alright. Up some of that water. I am keeping this a little lighter because I know that I'm gonna go darker in some areas. Once I get into some of those accents. So I'm just sort of creating a little bit of a general wash to just hit some of these shapes. Just the major shapes right now. Nice thing with this paper is that it actually holds a decent amount of moisture for a while, so I can, usually I'll have a little bit of time at least to come back in and kind of wet some edges and push them around a bit. So I feel like you have a bit of control, which is pretty rad. Hang on, my chat is being weird. Okay. There we go. I'm actually not a huge fan of rendering in watercolor. I love it when other people do it. I think it looks amazing, and of course I always appreciate the control that people have with it. I personally, when I've tried to render, sometimes it's successful, but a lot of times it's just not the kind of marks that I want to make with it. So I've learned that rendering in watercolor, not my way of doing things. I want something that's more blue for the shadows in her jacket, because she's wearing it's like a white leather jacket, so it's really picking up some other colors. Have I tried the Stillman and Bryn sketchbooks? No, I haven't. I've actually never heard of them, but I am curious. What about them makes you ask? Do they do like a good mid-tone? Like a really green, weird. Yeah, I haven't really looked into them, but I'll definitely check them out. Stillman and Bryn. Canson used to make a fantastic mid-tone. I think they'd called it a mid-tone scrapbook, and that thing was great, but they stopped making them years ago. I still have one, but not a lot of pages left on it. And so for Cottonwood also makes one. I feel like they do a little too much of a plate finish on it for my taste. I don't think the wet media, like watercolor at least, I don't think sits as nicely on theirs. So I was really, really stoked when Strathmore came out with this one. Because they had one that was just white paper, Strathmore did, and I really liked that one. So then when I saw that they released a mid-tone version, I think it comes in gray or tan. I like the tan tone just because I tend to do more figurative stuff, and the tan tone just works as a really nice mid-tone for skin. But I bet the gray is rad as well, if that's your thing. Alright, let's do some, get a bit take some of that out because I don't need as light of a wash here. I'm going to do some of the accents. This neutral tint is kind of cool for darkening some stuff without, although that might be the moon glow, but that's okay because we're going to go pretty dark on this anyway. A little French ultramarine, but the neutral tint is actually pretty nice for darkening things without messing with the color too much. Let's see here. God, always the choice, right? Do we go with a cool black or a warm black? Always a tough one. I do like to keep the darks a little warmer. I feel like they get a little more depth that way. Of course, then you get glare from the light on the water, but that's okay. So I'm just coming through and hitting the accents. I can always come in and soften some of the edges where I want them. But I do like the look of kind of the layered marks, so I don't mind some of the hard edges. I could do it with the number 6 brush. Honestly, it holds enough of a point, and it kind of just depends on what kind of look you're going for. The only reason I pulled this one out is because I had paint on this, and rather than just wash this one out and use it, it was easier to just bring some water in with this brush. So it's always handy to have a couple of brushes if you want to quickly move from pigment to water. So, but I think with the scale of this, I could, and for shits and giggles, let's do it. The Escoda definitely keeps enough of a point to be able to do some very detailed work, or at least small marks. It doesn't necessarily have to be detailed, right? It might just be little. Some of the heat in there. I will come through with some gouache pretty soon, knowing that I'm gonna lighten up some areas in the shadows. I know a lot of times people will be like, don't use white in the shadows, but whatever. I do what I want. As long as it doesn't get too light, right? Like, you just gotta control it a bit. But I'm more interested right now in just laying down some shapes and tones that I know I'm gonna lighten up a little bit afterward. So that's what we're doing. I'm not sure which ones are the Da Vinci Maestros. I have a couple of Da Vinci travel brushes. They're like the black ones that unscrew, similar, like the brush fits in the handle, but I honestly, like, I hate those handles, and I hate the whole, like, screwing and unscrewing the cap thing, and yeah, I couldn't. I mean, whatever. I've used them, and I have them, and I got them for a great price, considering they're also sable brushes, which is rad, you know. It's hard to beat sable. I know a lot of people will just use synthetics, and they're fine with that, but for me, just the spring that the natural hair has, it's pretty tough to beat. So that's what I tend to stick with. Alright, let's get a little more accents in here, and then jump into some lights. I want this to be okay. Let's jump into some gouache. We'll start with the flesh tones. And this is where I probably put out way too much of these other colors. Mostly what I'm going to use is the white mixed with some watercolors. But I do like the gouache colors. If I want, something that is very opaque, then I can always mix those in. And because gouache does dry darker in the higher values, it's always good to test it. Especially because this paper actually works really well with her skin tone. Go a bit more yellow. And maybe a tad lighter. So this is where the Holbein gouache, I think, is just hands down the best. Is when you lighten colors, they stay clean. They don't get super chalky. I don't like that about other gouache. Now I know people get used to it, and I see people, all kinds of people, do really amazing shit with all different types of gouache, but I like Holbein. Start to cut into the lights here. Obviously, if I was going to use just watercolor, I would preserve my lights. Since you can only go back so far. You can always kind of dab up some colors with watercolor, but not a ton. Get a nice kind of hot mid-tone here. Just to play up some of those transitions, especially where I'm getting more of that kind of raking light. And it's really just the light playing with the blood that's under the skin there. So and then the fun thing with gouache is because it's so unstable, right? Like, I shouldn't say unstable, it's so delicate. Right? Gouache is super, super delicate. But the fun thing is then you can always come back in and kind of bring some water in and fuck with it a little bit. To blend it and get some nice watery marks happening. I'm going to... the other fun thing is that I can kind of thin it down and it will have an interesting look, I think. I don't know if like Robert McGinnis would have agreed with me, but I do like being able to kind of give it a little bit of that kind of transparency. So she has this kind of reflected light. I feel like I'm gonna have to darken her nose a little bit. Let's see here. Now this doesn't have to be, at least for my purposes, I'm not terribly concerned with like any kind of a perfect likeness. This would be more, one, I just enjoy the process. Two, if I do want to do a painting, ultimately, like a finished painting, then this is a nice way to figure out, a color palette or something like that. For me, right now, it's really more just about, getting a nice sketch on paper. I feel like I used to have a little more of an interest in doing some kind of portrait paintings. But that's kind of few and far between these days. Really love illustration, narrative illustration, so I don't quite know where portrait painting would fit into my work. But that's okay. There are enough amazing portrait painters out there. I don't have to do it. They're better at it than I am. Getting some of that kind of bounce light, because I had this really cool, it was actually just, I think it was just I used a flashlight from my phone as this kind of bounce light, and it created this really like very cool cold light, which is kind of rad. Alright. Let's get some of this white in here. You don't have to go super detailed. We can often get away with just having a few little details hinted at that then kind of tightens up the whole thing, and you don't have to go crazy. Sort of get away with hinting at some of that stuff, and then sort of tricks the eye into thinking the rest of it is maybe a little more detailed than it is. Unless, of course, you really want to paint a ton of detail, in which case, go for it. Gotcha, there's a button there. A little bit of mid-tones in here. Right, so just kind of cooled off that light color because it was pretty yellow, and then just watered it down so that some of that mid-tone comes through. I feel like I really want to play up that blue that's in the shadows. Because that jacket's white, the blue is like really picking up. So again, that's where the gouache is very handy. Keeping it pretty transparent, because I don't want those shadows to get super opaque. And I want to be able to see some of that kind of rougher mark making in there, but I definitely want a hotter blue than I would be able to get, only because I'm working on mid-tone, right? If I was working on white paper with just watercolor, then you could get a really hot blue knowing that the luminosity of the white paper is going to show through. Don't have that working on mid-tone. So I think that's really where the gouache comes in handy. I might not really use gouache if I was working on white paper. Not true, I still use gouache on white paper. But whatever. Yeah, it's I tend to go a little tighter when I use gouache as well, just because I think the direct nature of it and doing these very defined marks, and the ability to kind of push and pull some things, maybe sort of lends itself kind of to naturally going a little tighter with it. Or maybe it's just, it's kind of the result of it, of being able to sort of push and pull. Now I'm going to see if I can. This is kind of weird. I want to get a little bit of the background in there just because I like the way that it's kind of chiseling out the form on this side. I'm not going to go crazy, it's just to lighten it up a little bit. Now I'm kind of digging the sort of feel of the limited value range that it has right now, but I'm kind of missing, because she has black hair, so I don't know if I want to go that route. That will change a painting or a sketch a lot as soon as you start getting like that full range of values. I'm not sure I want to go that way, but I might. putting some water down so that I can do a little bit of a wash. Again, it's kind of a nice way to chisel out some shapes. And then going a little darker can maybe give me a little more room to go darker with her hair without feeling like it completely changes. Let's get us a nice dark kind of pigment here. Burnt umber and ultramarine are great complement, so it's a nice way to, I don't know, it's something I had learned in one of my classes in school, and I've always used them together because you can create really nice grays with those, but you can also do that with, alizarin, crimson, and olive green. Or almost any red and olive green. Those are also great complements. Or cobalt and burnt sienna work pretty well together too. That would be more expensive though. No sense using expensive colors for neutral to mix up neutrals, right? That's kind of silly. Again, hinting at some little details, even just small hair shapes, can go a long way toward just making the piece feel a little, maybe more finished than it actually is. Which is all, subject to opinion, right? I love sketches, and for me, half the time I don't feel the need to completely finish something out in terms of rendering, and I don't necessarily think it makes for a better image either. But I know that a lot of the average person, when you get out of the artist circles, the average person does like to see, things that look like a photograph or whatever. And that's fine. If those are the people we're selling to, then, sometimes we have to bite the bullet and render the shit out of something because it makes it better in their eyes. Whatever. We do what we gotta do. Oh, Autumn. Oh, the mic is hot. How is that? Autumn is our resident audio expert, so Oh, too low now. Okay. How about that? Microphone check. Check. Check, check. Check. Check, check. Is that better? Cool. Word. Thank you, sir. Awesome. Let's get that necklace in there because it's subtle, but it's cool. Let's try and keep it subtle so that we don't go overboard because perfect. Love it. Love it. Alright. I want to get some little hotter highlights on her skin. I just have, by the way, I just laid the gouache out on a wet paper towel, just so that it doesn't sit there and dry out, because unlike watercolor, gouache does not reconstitute well. You can do it, but it's never going to be as opaque when you reconstitute it. So it's good if it doesn't dry out, right? Oh, look at that little elf girl emoji, or mermaid girl, actually. She was a mermaid. Okay, I'm pretty sure that will be light enough to give us some of these hotter. I do kind of want to come in and get some more interesting color variation. I will say on the stream, it is a bit desaturated, unfortunately. Something about the compression that desats it, unfortunately. So it is a little more saturated than what you guys are seeing. So imagine if you could like hit Command U and crank up the saturation by like 10%. That's what I'm seeing. I think one of the things that I love about mixing gouache and watercolor is just the ability to kind of play around and, you know, push and pull. And I don't know, I enjoy that. I like the freedom of that, and I just enjoy being able to sort of play around and experiment and see what happens. Let's get this in here. Hotter shadow. So, you know, this is where I'll start to kind of see like, oh hey, I could go hotter here, darker here. I don't know. One of these days I'll be able to do it all correct on the first try. But that is not this day. Sorry. But this is also where you have to be careful, right? Because you can start to overwork something, and you know, I don't know, some of it might not be perfect, and then you have to just kind of decide, like, well, is that seriously detracting from it, or can I get away with not worrying about that too much? It's raining some more. Raining. 10, 12, okay. I do want to get a few, like, let's clear off a little bit of space here. I always like to get a few just sort of hot hits of color. What the hell? It's picked up something. It just kind of helps with the luminosity and all that stuff, and it, you know, might not be something I necessarily see in there, but it might be something that I know we could see, right? We might see it if we were actually in front of the person, or maybe it's just there but it's very subtle and I just want to play it up. And I don't even know if you guys can really see these. I'll zoom in just a second. I probably should have done that anyway. Yeah, but then you wouldn't have been able to see the palette. I don't know if the palette was helpful or not, but sometimes it is. Okay. I'll see, I'll try zooming in on this. I'll try not to fuck it up too much. Get her over here so we can focus on her. Back to manual. So little zoomed in so you can see a little bit more. I actually want to adjust her eye shape a little bit. That was bugging me. It's stupid how much like a millimeter of mark can make a difference. So that's the first one. I will jump into the second little sketch. Good morning, Joshua. Thanks for joining. Just in time. Gonna jump into the second one here. Let's zoom back out. Now this one, she doesn't actually have as much cool light happening, at least in her skin. There's still some, but not nearly as much. So I feel like I can kind of use this as a base, but it's hard for me not to use cobalt blue because it's just such a great blue, right? It's kind of a perfect blue, meaning it's neither yellow nor red. Oh well, yeah. I'm glad you could catch the stream too. I'm gonna get back to streaming on Mondays, and I'm hoping I can maybe even do some like early morning streams during the week, but we'll see. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. It mostly depends on how busy work gets. Alright, so let's jump into oh, why is that? Maybe I think I might go more that route. And actually, before I do, I gotta clean out the water. BRB. And we're back. Nice clean water. Alright. Let's see here. How's that? It's actually a nicer color. Sure. Why not? Let's run with it. This one I'm probably going to keep a little looser, just for fun, because us artists, we can appreciate loose sketches, and there's something to be said for some direct mark making. Okay, it is starting to rain much harder right now here in Pasadena. So we're just gonna hope that the power stays on. My building, and it's not that the power will go out completely, but it'll surge, right? It'd get a kind of a brownout, and then everything shuts off. Hope that doesn't happen. If it does, hey, at least we got the first one recorded. Damn, I'm going to be hesitant to do much to this one. I'm already really digging those watermarks. It's one of those where I might just have to be like, okay, we're not going to take this too much further because I don't want to fuck it up. But sometimes that's a good experience too. Well, a learning experience, let's put it that way. It's never a good experience. Fucking up a nice sketch. Yeah, if there are any questions, people, feel free. Chime in, ask away. Most of this stuff I feel is pretty straightforward, but who knows? Maybe it doesn't. They don't have to be questions regarding this either. You have questions about life. I'm probably not the one to ask, but, I'll give it my best shot. One of the things I really like to do with watercolor, especially if I am going to keep it kind of watery like this with these marks, is when you mix the color, don't mix them too thoroughly. You get these nice sort of these places where they'll kind of break apart. I'm getting a bit of the blue separating from the reds in here, and that's a really, I don't know, you can use that to your advantage to get some variety in these areas without having to work too hard to get them in there. I've got some of the blue reflecting the inside of her jacket. I might do experiment time. Just mix some gouache in there. Now, I was saying gouache will break apart when you water it down too much. But hey, if you're aware of it, I don't know, it can have a nice look too. It always takes me that first one to really kind of warm up on these. And then I always find any of the little sketches, paintings I do after that go much faster. If I did these every day, that might be a different story. I'd be able to kind of jump right into them maybe. But no, warm-ups are always necessary. Just makes us do better work. And it used to be a very kind of traditional thing to do for artists. They would warm up, and professionally we're talking. Who knows what the fuck fine artists do, but us professional artists, on the commercial side at least. I always used to have a warm-up period in the morning, and I think once timelines got shorter and shorter, no thanks to digital and being able to just change shit whenever, it sort of, some of that went out the door. And it's tough if you're a freelancer to sit there and do warm-ups. Sometimes it's better to maybe do some of that at home or something, or get in early if you have to work on site, and do some warm-ups so at least the client feels like they're getting their money's worth. It's tough because it should be kind of included, right? Because it is necessary. It's better to spend an hour warming up on a few sketches or one sketch, rather than struggling on a piece that actually matters, right? Something that's going to go out to a client. You don't want to struggle on that stuff. Because if it's your own sketch, whatever, who cares? There's no right and wrong. You just got to get your hand and your brain working together, right? It's really all we're trying to do when we're doing warm-ups. I might zoom in on this one for you guys as I'm working. At least a little bit. It is a little smaller. Lighten that up just a little for you guys. Alright. Just so you can see it a little better. A bit of olive green in here, just to kind of kick. It might be a little too dark for. You always have to consider what the painting or sketch or whatever can actually support, right? And if I haven't set up really dark values anywhere, then I probably don't want to just throw them in randomly someplace, especially in a place that doesn't matter. So it's always something to be aware of. Man, I really don't want to like touch those shadows. I kind of want to go darker, but I don't want to touch those shadows. Shit. Maybe we'll just hit a couple of marks and go darker. We'll see if I can get the courage up. It's a hard lesson to learn, right? When to just leave something alone. Because, like, will adding to it make it better? It's always what you want to ask yourself. Brett asking if I feel I can work faster with traditional versus digital. I can get an interesting piece faster traditionally, only because the inherent texture and the mark making in traditional. If the goal was to render the hell out of it and make it super detailed, then no, digital much faster. Because you have the option to go much more detailed in digital than you ever could traditionally. Traditional, the more detailed you want to go, generally the bigger you have to work, which means more surface to cover, more marks to make, and it's just, it will take longer. But I feel like I can get a more interesting sketch much faster traditionally. Because I can just lay down a couple marks in watercolor and they look cool. Whereas to get that interesting of marks digitally, like, you actually have to really work at it. And not that easy to do. Realized her hair goes down a bit more here. And I figured I might. So this is one way. If you don't want to, like, fuck up what you've laid down too much, right? I don't want to cover the whole thing. But also just do some more direct marks in the same way. Nice thing with watercolors, it's additive, so as you layer it, it gets darker. So it's not that difficult, right? To kind of get a little more going on. And it doesn't take much to kind of add another layer, I guess, a layer of interest and detail. Just a couple little marks. I think some of that, though, in terms of digital versus traditional, it also just depends on the artist, right? There are artists that do great stuff digitally, and I mean, I'm amazed at how quickly some of them can get stuff down and it looks really interesting. I think because my time is always kind of split between digital and traditional, and I did not learn digitally. So, I don't have some kind of like set process. Honestly, I use digital very traditionally, and that's intentional. It's because, like, I don't want to be sitting there doing a bunch of digital stuff and then be completely floundering when I go back to traditional. I want some of it to translate over a little bit. And it's limited, right, in terms of how much it actually translates over. But to a degree, it can, depending on how you work. Oh man, alright. Let's hit some of the lights in her coat. It's a pretty... The key light is a pretty yellow light source in this, so that white is basically... Like, the white of her jacket is basically just like a really high-key yellow. Okay. I have no idea how I'm going to hit the lights on their face because I really like how her face is right now, but I think there's an answer, and I'm just going to put it off until I know what that answer is. And it might be, I think, just working transparently and sparingly with the lights. Because I really don't think it would serve to fuck with the mark making too much. Because it's really nice right now. And at the end of the day, of course, I don't actually have to do more on her face, but... And I only will if I think it will make it better. I'm just not convinced of that yet. course, I can just come in with some water, and it's a little too much water, and just soften up some of the edges to get some transitions and quickly get a little bit more modeling in the forms. Don't need a lot, but just enough to kind of lend some variety. Doesn't take much to differentiate form shadows from cast shadows, right? Get those soft form shadow edges and hard cast shadow edges. Again, I just want a little more blue in the shadows of her jacket, so watering down some gouache again. One of the nice things is I like the watermark edge that you get with when you really thin it out. And just let it dry. Just put it down and don't touch it. Don't mind that. This will be subtle. In fact, it probably won't change the value much, but it will just add a little bit of heat. So that can be kind of a nice transition tone without having to mess with this too much. Oh, she is missing an eyebrow. Cool. I think I will do some very transparent I want it to be hot, but I want it to be really transparent. Just really for some color variation. I'm not fucking with it too much. It's just some subtle stuff to give some more life to the skin tones. Because obviously the mid-tone is kind of just tan. And it's not quite enough to give us the life that we want, so... Cool. And then I will do a little bit of highlight work on her skin, and then I think I will call it after that, so I don't fuck it up. But like that. Okay. Let's see here. I want these to be subtle. I don't want to go overboard, which could happen pretty quick. It's good to just take your time. Consider each mark. Yes, I would say that is a constant struggle. I think it's really difficult to keep the spirit of the sketch, and I think any artist who says they don't struggle with that is lying. Even the best ones. I mean, look at them. The amount of times that I see, like, oh, here's a prelim sketch, and then here's the final piece, and there's just a life in the prelim sketch that the final doesn't have. But you also have to consider much of the time there's a size difference, and when I can put down one mark, case in point, basically one mark that says what I needed to say, but if I blow this up, and I was doing an 18 by 24 portrait, all of a sudden that becomes a bunch of marks, and there's no getting away from that, unless you just size up your brushes accordingly. That could be an answer. That's one of the reasons Jenny Saville's work is so amazing, and it has so much life, even though it's like the size of a wall. But she's using giant, like, house painting brushes on the ends of broomsticks. So she's using massive brushes when she paints that big. So, there's something to be said for that. So it's possible to keep that life and vibrancy, but it's a challenge. you know, sometimes that's in the drawing, and I think that's where, with today's technology, there are things that can aid us. You know, using our initial drawing and then using a projector. Like, you just get pretty rad digital projectors that are small, and that can at least help you to project your actual drawing just bigger. And so I think doing stuff like that can at least keep some of the life in the gesture. After that, it's up to you and your painting skills. I don't want to lose her necklace because I like that. Oh. Too watery. Actually, one of the things I do like about popping in some like darks, even though they're not on her face, is I like that kind of air that it gives the shadows. It's kind of fun. Couple of those hot marks that I mentioned earlier. They just help to kind of fake that blood that's under the skin. So I think that's why I always tend to use them and play them up a little bit. I usually put them on the edge of cast shadows, but I just love some of those cast shadows. I don't want to fuck with the edges. Like some of the watermark edges. So we will leave them. Because you can't get them back. All right. Any questions, anybody, about materials or why the hell I did what I did or whatever? Because I'm going to call these done. I don't really want to mess with them anymore. Sort of. Let's see. Hang on. It's only because I see some form shadows. But please, questions. Anybody? I had actually meant to do this earlier, so it's not me noodling. Just wanted to soften some of those. Get a little bit of form in there. And a couple little details. Little... Yeah. We are going to do this again. Definitely next Monday, but I'm hoping... I'm just in the process of getting stuff together for a book. So a lot of my free time is going toward making sure all that stuff is where it needs to be. But as soon as that's done, then I want to get into doing some streams more often, not just on Monday. It's just I have Monday off, so it's easy for me to just sit down and do a nice stream on a Monday. But there's no reason I couldn't just pop on for an hour or so here and there during the week too. So I'm hoping to do that. It's always nice because I can just kind of leave my setup as is, and then just know that, okay, hey, time to go, let's do it. So yeah, there will definitely be more little details that I think make a difference. I forgot the buttons on her jacket, and they're a nice sort of little graphic design element, and I had left space for them. So let's put them on. But yes, we will definitely do this again. Watercolors, we'll do some pencil sketching, we'll do pen sketching, might even break out some oil paints at some point. Who knows? Anything and everything. It's all fair game. So, thank you guys so much for joining. Once this becomes more of a regular thing, hopefully you guys will subscribe and just keep coming back for more, because I'll be here. So thank you guys so much. Hope you enjoyed it. You'll be able to watch, if you missed the first part, you can always go back, watch it again. It'll also be over on YouTube, so you'll have access to it. Until next time, see you guys.